Mutant Mayhem reboots the Ninja Turtles for arguably the freshest take on the teens yet. But behind all the laughs and flair, what's it really about? This is the secret of the ooze. Mutant Mayhem indeed follows many of the same beats of other TMNT media. 4 baby turtles get covered in glowing ooze, are raised by a giant rat sensei, then turn into the teenage mutant ninjas. Mutant Mayhem, however, emphasizes the turtles' separation from the human world. In this version of the story, the quartet has lived their whole lives in solitude, as Splinter is afraid of humans due to his upbringing as a rat in the city. The turtles then are justifiably jealous of the human world and feel isolated due to not being able to participate in it. For this reason, when the time arrives, it makes sense that A, the turtles end up helping April O'Neil, but also B, that they initially fall in with Superfly's mutant gang, since it's the first time they've ever met other mutants, and thus the first time they ever felt truly accepted.
I can't believe there are other mutants like us!
Superfly is a villain made specifically for the movie, and he is a super strong, super intelligent humanoid fly. However, eventually, the turtles have to fight Superfly when it becomes clear his plan is to wipe out all humans so mutants can rule the world.
That's a take.
At the end of Mutant Mayhem, the Ninja Turtles have to work together to stop Superfly's genocidal plan. They accomplish this by destroying the super weapon Superfly had been building throughout the film. The Turtles even eventually get the help of Superfly's mutant minions, which include classic TMNT comic and cartoon mainstays like Bebop and Rocksteady, Monto Gecko, Genghis Frog, and more, who were really never on board with killing all the humans anyway. The mutants even confessed to the Turtles that they only went along with Superfly's villainous plan because they were convinced by him that it was the only way they'd ever be accepted in the world. However, after the initial battle, while they all indeed succeed in destroying his superweapon, Superfly unfortunately transforms into Super Duperfly, a giant kaiju-like monster rampaging throughout New York City. It then takes all of the Turtles' individual skills, Leonardo's leadership, Raphael's brute strength, Michelangelo's ability to think on his feet, and Donatello's superior battle tactics and love of anime to finally take Super Duperfly down once and for all, saving humanity. During the Ninja Turtles' climactic fight with the rampaging Super Duperfly, the media unfortunately misreports that they are in cahoots with the villainous monster, even aiding him in the destruction of New York City. That is, until April O'Neil is able to infiltrate a live news broadcast in the middle of a big kaiju fight and explain to the citizens of the city that the Turtles are actually fighting to the death to protect the people. Afterward, when Super Duperfly is about to crush the Turtles like pistachios and things are at their most dire, the humans of New York rise up and help save them from certain doom, giving them the leg up to escape and finally defeat the giant fly monster for good. After saving the city, the Ninja Turtles then become instant celebrities, signing babies, getting asked for selfies, and more. In this way, the ending disproves both Superfly and Splinter's views on humanity. Namely, while mutant discrimination does indeed exist, such as Splinter being attacked in the past, as well as the evil Techno-Cosmic Research Institute that wanted to extract the Turtles' ooze, the Turtles learn that humans can also be helpful, kind, and supportive.
Do you think there are people who will accept us?
By defending the Turtles, the people of New York prove to Splinter that they were indeed worth saving. At the very end, the Turtles even get accepted to go to high school like they always wanted to.
What's our last name?
Do we not have last name?
Like practically all post-MCU superhero movies these days, Mutant Mayhem includes a post-credit sequence that teases an upcoming villain. In it, we find the evil CEO of TCRI, Cynthia Utrom, lamenting that she still needs to capture the Turtles at some point to continue extracting them and finish her plan of creating mutated animal-human hybrid super soldiers. However, she also explains to an underling that now that the Turtles are fully integrated into the public, it'll be more difficult to capture them. However, she knows exactly the person to pull that job off, which of course leads to the film introducing this film universe's version of the iconic TMNT villain, Master Shredder. Unfortunately, we only see him briefly from behind, covered in shadows and standing on a dark, rainy rooftop at night. It's also obvious this version will be possibly even more spiked-covered and extreme than most previous versions of the character. Presumably, his role will be to track the Ninja Turtles down and bring them to Utrom and TCRI, perhaps to keep the company's name clean, as he'd been hired as a third-party mercenary. Mutant Mayhem is first and foremost about overcoming prejudice. The Turtles deal explicitly with prejudice multiple times throughout the story. In a particularly harrowing flashback, when the Turtles were still babies, we see Master Splinter try to bring his adopted sons out into the human world, but they are attacked and almost killed by an unruly mob of humans. And then, later in the film, the turtles are blamed for the rampage on the city alongside Superfly simply because they're also mutants. Furthermore, the film is also about the need for active allyship. During the climax of the film, the humans end up helping the turtles to give them a leg up, both as signs of solidarity, but also thematically, showing humanity's worth being saved. The citizens of New York City put their own lives on the line to help protect the turtles and become more than just helpless victims that reap the rewards of the heroes' sacrifice and hardship, becoming active allies in their own salvation. Another important message of Mutant Mayhem is the importance of found families. This, of course, refers to Splinter taking care of the baby turtles and raising them as his own. We see the struggles he goes through with learning to trust his growing children to make their own decisions as they get older, despite the dangers of the world. However, it also refers to the mutants as well. After TCRI goons capture their creator, Dr. Baxter Stockman, during the opening of the film, Superfly rescues his fellow mutants from harm and raises all of them on his own as a big brother figure. Even Baxter Stockman's motivation for creating the mutants in the first place was to create a family of his own.
My dad, Baxter Stockman, he's the one who dumped the ooze down the drain, baby.
Luckily, at the end of the film, the Turtles and Splinter allow Superfly's former mutant family to live with them in the sewers. We even see all the mutant characters settled into the Turtles' home as they get ready for school. In fact, Scumbug and Splinter are seen to be a romantic couple by the end. It's an interesting turn of events, as Splinter has never had any romantic entanglements in any other version of the TMNT property. Another vital message that Mutant Mayhem imparts is the importance of finding a healthy family unit that accepts you for who you are. For instance, this universe's version of Splinter is extremely overprotective of the Turtles. While his fears are mostly reasonable and his overprotectiveness comes from a place of love and caring, he nonetheless isolates his children and tries to force them into a life of solitude and loneliness. Splinter loosens up by the end of the story, mainly because of his interactions with the villain of the film, Superfly. After Dr. Stockman was captured by TCRI, Superfly took care of the other younger mutants and raised them as his own. However, Superfly raised the other mutants to be as hateful and vengeful as him, and thus was able to gaslight and impose his will on his mutated siblings to enact his plan to eradicate humanity. During the climax of the film, Superfly tries to get Splinter to help him fulfill his plan, telling him explicitly that they're basically the same. They both hate humans, and they are both trying to protect their families from humans by isolating them and instilling them with anger and fear. Splinter at that moment realizes he's on the same path as Superfly, with his aforementioned overprotectiveness and contempt for humans, and he decides to help fight against Superfly's ideology instead. With any new reboot of a beloved franchise like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, there's always the question of why now? Or what does this new version bring to the table? Luckily, Mutant Mayhem treads on some new, exciting territory for the TMNT franchise. For one, all the mutant villains except for Superfly are completely reformed by the end of the story. This is interesting because while it seems like that would limit new stories for sequels, it also opens up opportunities to tell new stories with these characters as well. For instance, since all the mutants are seemingly reformed, will they no longer be villains for the Turtles to fight in the future? Or will some of them relapse into villainy? How will society at large deal with a known community of mutants? There are many questions and story possibilities there for the franchise to explore further. Cynthia Utrom is another villain character like Superfly who was created specifically for Mutant Mayhem. She is the CEO of the evil TCRI and is on a mission to extract ooze from the Turtles to create a race of animal hybrid super soldiers to sell to the US military. However, while she doesn't seem to have an obvious analog from the TMNT comics or any other associated cartoons or films, she might be related to, or possibly be a new version of, another popular villain from the TMNT universe. Cynthia Utrom's last name is actually the name of the alien species that the famous villain Krang belongs to. He's the pink, brain-shaped alien who rests in the belly of a giant robot. Furthermore, Krang and the Utroms are known to be associated with TCRI in the comics and various cartoon continuities, and in some continuities, they are actually even responsible for the goo that created the Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Well, we prefer the term ooze, but yeah.
Not only that, but Cynthia's look, including her yellow and pink glasses, general color scheme, and elevated hairdo that evokes the color and shape of the original robot's silver antenna, evokes the robot controlled by Krang or another Utrom alien antagonist. But we'll have to wait for the Mutant Mayhem sequel to know for sure. As mentioned earlier, the main antagonist of most TMNT properties, Master Shredder, shows up briefly in the after-credits sequence of Mutant Mayhem. he doesn't do much but menacingly stand on a dark, seedy rooftop. In an interview with comicbook.com, director Jeff Rowe said Shredder was actually in some of the original versions of the film. At some point, Shredder's role was cut down considerably, apparently due to Rowe wanting to keep the villain a mutant like the heroes, and thus Shredder only shows up in the film's post-credit scene. However, if Shredder were to be in early versions of the film, that means the ending would have been much different as a result. Now, while we don't know what Shredder's role would have been in those earlier versions, his involvement would most likely have changed the ending significantly, if not made it entirely different. Perhaps, like in the cartoons and 2016's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows, Shredder himself was floated as being the one behind the animal hybrid experiments in previous drafts instead of Cynthia Utrom. With Shredder in the film, the themes of alienation and prejudice wouldn't be as much a central focus the way they are with the mutants versus mutant storyline, so the overall message would have changed.